So welcome everyone to our third and final installment of the Conjugate Training series. Thank you so much for joining us thus far, whether it's been live or if you've watched the recorded sessions. Um, yeah, I know that we are going to allow for a little bit of extra time today if needed. Hopefully you all had enough time to check out the email or the two emails that Sarah sent out, including the conjugate training examples as requested and also a lovely coupon for some services with Sarah. So please, if you are able to take advantage of that. And again, my name is Madeline. I am co-founder of Strength for All Bodies. Thanks again for all your time. And I just realized that I have not asked for any money. So just in case anyone is looking for a way to support Strength for All Bodies and being able to um, put out resources like this and do what we're trying to do to expand inclusivity and accessibility in strength sports. You can find us on Instagram at Strength for All Bodies and online, good old fashioned internet at strengthforallbodies.com. And yeah, please also visit Sarah Buckley at Persist Fitness Training on Instagram and persistfitnesstraining.com. And check out all the stuff that she's got going on. She's got a pretty full link tree that I was looking at today. So yeah, at that, I will pass it off to Sarah to take us through our final session.
Thank you, Madeline. Yeah, so I had good feedback from folks on going over some kind of like case study examples. So some of the things that I prepared are actual like nitty-gritty programming. Some are more high-level concept, and some stuff I'm kind of going to take us through together as a crew. But I also wanted to give some time at the beginning if folks had questions from previous seminars or just they had a general question. We can start there today, and then I'll kind of dive back in with the curriculum.
I'll kick us off. I had a question for Sarah that I actually texted her earlier this week, and then I thought this is a good question to ask as it is relevant. And that was when it comes to max effort training sessions, how do you juggle like calling it because you're at your max strength effort or calling it because your form starts to break down? And when is it sort of safe to push it? Are there certain lifts where you would want to call it because form is breaking down and it'll then turn into a completely different lift or something? And so I just was asking Sarah on her thoughts on that. And yeah, I'll let her explain what she shared with me.
Yeah, sure. That's a good question, and one that comes up frequently around max effort because, as coaches, we are trying to provide safe movement options for people to train, circumstances for people to train under. And so that max effort, the super heavy quality of the movement can sometimes get identified as dangerous, specifically just because of the load being applied to the human body. So, some of this is not to like undermine Madeline's question, but some of it is kind of like common sense as a coach. But at the same time, it's also just like knowing who you are working with. So unfortunately or fortunately, the answer to how do you know when an individual has reached their true maximum effort is going to be kind of like an it depends. So kind of like the three examples that I gave to Madeline to like kind of help paint a picture of what would be appropriate. Like, so we're going to go over some general population conjugate training programming today. And like general population, that nomenclature is so non-specific and broad to be almost meaningless. But what I am meaning by that is an individual who does not have competition performance goals, an individual who does not live to be in the gym. They are simply training for health, longevity, maybe they enjoy it. It's possibly an individual who actually has another like modality that they like even better, but they're in the gym to help them with performance in that modality. So it's kind of like anybody who's like not a strength athlete in my brain is like over here in this general population. They're not training, you know, they're training the minimum amount of times per week, etc. So for them, when we think about max effort, they they are going to be meeting their human being strength minimums kind of fairly quickly. If they're a new lifter, you know, there's good reason for an individual to be able to pick up something heavy off of the floor because they need to move a box, or they need to pick up their dog, or they're a caretaker for a loved one. But do most people from a simply quality of life standpoint need to say pick up 4, 5, 600 pounds off the floor? Probably not. Are there people who just want to do that because they enjoy doing it? Yes. So for the people who are trying to just be strong so they can be strong in their lives, my max effort kind of rule of thumb with them is they don't have the skill set to maintain position, nor do they necessarily have the inclination to grind through a lift. And I'm fine with that because grinding is a skill that is required for competition, but it is not necessarily required for just your day to day in the gym. Is it an important quality to have in life to just be able to overcome something that feels scary and both psychologically heavy as well as physically heavy? Yes. So I'm going to be looking for things. And the example I gave Madeline was like, if it's a safe movement, meaning like, for instance, maybe like a bench press off of pins or a deadlift off of pins. So it's a shorter range of motion and really kind of like all deadlifts. I don't want to say there's no risk, but what's going to happen if somebody starts to fail, they're going to either drop the bar or they're going to set it back down. So with a squat, a lot more things can go wrong because the bar is on your back, it's behind you. I do teach every single one of my people how to bail, and I do teach every single one of my people, particularly if they're in a group setting and it's not me, how to spot their teammates. So this answer is getting a little bit long-winded, but essentially you want to go as heavy as you can without breaking form. And the ultimate goal of, you know, an athlete or a person is to be able to maintain form as long as they can. But remember that the max efforts are testers. So it's going to kind of show us where those breakdowns are happening. And just because externally a lifter maybe doesn't externally break down, you could ask them and say, why was that lift so slow? It looked like your knees didn't cave, your back didn't fall over, you know, you didn't have any downward movement, but they're gonna know, oh wow, I like really was struggling at this particular point to do X, Y, and Z. And then, you know, as a coach, that's what you need to work on. Like that's a specific range that they need more strength in, etc. So if it's somebody who's like totally gen population, I would say that their max efforts, I more qualify those as heavy singles with great form. They're not taking really slow grinders. End of story. With an athlete, I'm going to push them harder to lift when they are scared and when things do not feel totally safe. Because sometimes you have to perform under circumstances, and whether it's safe, whether it's truly safe or not, isn't really like what we're dealing with. We're more just dealing with like the mental side of lifting, which is like, how can I overcome something? How can I have confidence in myself? How can I, you know, feel most prepared? And I think that, like I said before, lifting heavy is a skill, maintaining position is a skill. And if you're a strength athlete, your job is to maintain position under heavy load. So when we're doing max effort, we're practicing that. If you're somewhere in between, like you're a newer lifter, that's going to be kind of like up to the coach. I would say push an athlete on variations that are lower risk. I would say push an athlete at variations where they already have high confidence in themselves, and then use those movements to feed into the other variations where they are not quite as strong yet, or they feel like mentally challenged by a position. Anything else with that, Madeline?
No, thanks. I think breaking it down to, yeah, how you would treat like a gen pop and then a, a competitive strength athlete, especially for someone who is going to go on the platform or whatever your competitive sport is, you're not always going to be at your tip top form,
Yeah.
um, when you're doing an RPE 10. So
Yeah, that's an important thing to call out as well, is that like I also don't believe in like a perfect movement. Like we do patternized movements because it is an efficient way to load the body very, very heavy. And so when we were thinking about training, I know that I can, if I want to load my spine and I want to load my legs, and then I can do a super heavy squat. Like that's the heaviest, like that's the strongest movement that I have access to me for me. So in order for me to like get the most return out of training, I need to be a very, very efficient patterned squatter, because that just means I can lift more. However, I would recommend having strength ranges, 10 to 20% outside of what I would consider my actual squat pattern or my actual bench press pattern, because you're going to misgroove a bar. You are going to set up incorrectly, but still try to take a lift. All of these different things are going to happen. And so, like, I don't think that we should just be training just for patterns. However, like if you're an individual who's interested in getting strong, using patterns that have been identified as efficient ways for the human body to move collectively and globally is a good way to get strong. All right, any other questions? All right. Quickly, we're going to go to, I just wanted to, I'm not sure, Christy, I want to say is the person that asked me about the endurance athlete training split. So we're going to go over that. But then I also just wanted to call attention to, I mostly was dealing with methods and means that were relevant to like power athletes. So I added a slide, which is going to be slide 15. Make this bigger just for a second. And so I've added a couple of different methods that I didn't touch on before. And I pulled these directly from the strength manual for runners, raising strength to reduce injuries. It comes out of Westside Barbell. It's written by Louis Simmons. And so strength endurance and then dynamic endurance are both two methods that I would employ for someone who was an endurance athlete. And they're also two methods that I employ with my athletes who are hybrid athletes, meaning they need both power output for like their powerlifting sport, and they also need endurance for long distance running, cycling, swimming. Okay. So I'm not going to go into these. You can look into them. I have a resources, like additional resources page that's going to get sent out to you guys that has like a bunch of basically all my sources for this presentation. Longer books, textbooks, articles, podcasts, they all just live on this piece of paper. I keep track of it. So, but just know that there has been a slide added that directly correlates with the programming that we're going to go over. So let's start out with, I'm going to start. So what you guys have access to here is these tabs at the bottom. It's Gen Pop, powerlifting, endurance athlete, boxer, and then team splits. Team splits is meaning like college teams, high school teams, when you're not just dealing with one particular athlete and you're programming directly for them, but you also have to take into consideration the logistics of like 50 to 100 individuals. There's equipment constraints, there's time constraints. You're plugged into a network of coaches, athletic trainers, all of the things that athletes are involved in. And typically like a one-on-one athlete, they kind of have those systems too, but it's way easier to communicate about them, because I'm just going to say like, hey, what are your miles this week? Or like, hey, are you in a deficit or not? And then they would answer me and I would know. It wouldn't be this like, you wouldn't need some kind of collective system in order to address the team. Okay, so I'm going to go over Gen Pop because I don't really know anyone. I know maybe like 3 other coaches that use the conjugate method for general population. So I feel like that's going to be very valuable because I don't know a lot of other places you can get that information. The powerlifting tab is in here. I actually just pulled straight from my programming from my coach, who is Laura Phelps Stackhouse, and I'm a geared powerlifter. We're not going to go over that because there is so much information already available about the conjugate method for powerlifting. I am more than happy to have a private conversation with everybody about what that looks like if we have time at the end, but I just don't think that like that's a good use of our time today. Someone had asked about endurance athlete. We are going to go over that, boxer, and then team splits. So let's start with Gen Pop. And I actually set these up a little bit differently. There we go. Okay. So the way that this can be read is week 1, this is a 2 time per week individual. They train 2 hours of strength training a week. All right. Most conjugate splits are 4 days a week. So I have adapted the traditional conjugate sequencing system, also known as the West Side conjugate sequencing system, to be a 2-day split. And I've actually trained powerlifters on this split as well. So it can be done. People can compete with this split. Is it the most optimal? No, but it is very realistic and a lot of good work can get done. So what I've done over here is in this farthest left-hand column is the method that we are using. And then from left to right, you can see the corresponding means, which is basically what's the exercise that I am choosing to deliver the method through. I'm going to give examples of volume, and then I'm going to give some notes about kind of why I'm doing what I'm doing. This is actual programming that I've used with clients. I just pulled this from previous previous wave that I've done with my people. Anything that is in italics, I chose not to pull out. Breath work, cars, isometrics, other things like that. I put these in isometrics. We're not going to talk about them today. That is a completely, totally different presentation that has to do with something called internal strength training. It's wonderful. It's important. It's highly valuable. It should not be overlooked. We just don't have time today. So for me, with general population, everything is split up into a 4-week block because that's essentially how long a month is. And people understand a week and a month. And so this is the most straightforward way to communicate with them about what they're doing. And they are going to do a 3-week wave of both dynamic upper and dynamic lower. As a reminder, dynamic effort method corresponds with the special strength of explosive power. And I think like when you train for dynamic method, you're training for explosive power. Why would general population need explosive power? Well, dynamic effort will help you produce force and increase the rate of force production, meaning you're going to be able to push into the floor through your feet faster than you were when you were untrained, or faster than you were 6 months ago with training. So if you look at health, like health of human tissues, of biology, or you just, take a look around the next time you're at the mall or you're in the grocery store, like check out to see at the speed with which people are moving their bodies. People who do not feel safe in their bodies, people who are not sure about the control that they have in their bodies, are going to move very slowly because they don't feel like they can move quickly. And perhaps their nervous system is protecting them and they simply can't even move quickly. So getting off of a toilet, getting out of a chair, getting out of a car, falling and getting back up, having the capacity to get back up off of the floor. Those are all kinds of things where we need to be able to produce power ourselves without any external load and then express it. So that's the thing that we're developing through dynamic effort method. So what ends up happening, and this is programming that I use for, like I said, for my clients, and I see them 2 times a week. The first day, they're going to come in and do the main movement lower, which in this case is a safety squat bar against chains, no box. The first week of dynamic effort method is going to always be 50% of your 1 rep max plus 20% in accommodating resistance, either bands or chain weight. Now, I put in the notes over here that I am using the eye test with my general population people almost constantly. I do track their numbers. So I do realistically know what, I don't know, say Madeline is my client. I know what Madeline's 50% is for a safety squat bar against chains with no box. I've tested that with them. I know what it is. I'm going to cut it in half. I'm going to add the appropriate chain weight, and we're going to do a 5x5 the first week. Now, with general population, not athletes, they are coming to me in all different sorts of their externals are externaling. That's what I'm going to say. They aren't great about their sleep. They're not super good about hydration. Their diet is I don't know what. They have stress. They have all these things. So I'm going to use kind of like art and science combined, and I'm going to say, okay, 50% is a great place for us to start. If the bar is moving too slowly, and again, it's that 0.8 to 1.8 meters per second. If the bar is moving slower than that, I know that that load is too much for them on that day. And I will make adjustments for them on that day. Because remember, dynamic systems theory changes. I'm not going to make decisions just because Madeline did 300 pounds 6 months ago and I put 150 plus chain on the bar and it's moving really crappy. It doesn't mean she can't do 300 pounds or they can't do 300 pounds. It just means that right now in this moment in time, it needs to be lowered. It could also be kind of converse where it's moving so well that I might choose to increase the percentage slightly. Now, that's where you got to really know who you're working with, because with dynamic effort, speed has to trump load, and we need to be able to add about 10 to 15% each week for 3 weeks. So it's supposed to be moving very quick and feel very easy that first week, because by the time we get done with the 3-week wave, it could be, 20 to 40 pounds heavier than what it is then. So we don't want to automatically go up, even if the bar speed is very, very good and it feels very comfortable for them, because we might accidentally end up running out of runway, meaning we aggressively add too much too fast. And then by the time we get to the 3rd week, they're not able to maintain bar speed. So that's just something to keep in mind. I like there's a lot of different ways that you can accumulate volume here, but for dynamic effort, what it has been found is the most effective volume parameters is somewhere between like 20 and 28 reps. So I typically go week 1, 5x5, week 2, 6x4, week 3, 8x3. But it could also be done with doubles. There's other ways to do it. I like this way because even though the sets are increasing, the individual reps are decreasing as the load goes up. So it's more likely that I'm going to get on the heaviest week, which is the 3rd week, I'm going to get 3 good clean repetitions versus 5 clean repetitions. So that's why I like this particular model that I'm choosing. So they will do just one main movement. And if you don't use accommodating resistance, this number becomes 60%. So if you don't use any chain and you don't lose any band, your first week of dynamic effort is going to be 60% of your 1 rep max. If you do not know your 1 rep max of this particular variation, there's kind of a little bit of a rule of thumb that we would use for that. So say, again, we'll use Madeline. Say I knew that Madeline's straight bar back squat was 300 pounds, but we're going to do the safety squat bar. Every variable that we add that's different from a straight bar, because, and they're a power lifter, so I'm going to assume that their back squat is their best lift. Like, they're not better at a safety squat bar than they are straight bar, because that's not, but they don't need to be the best at that. So the safety squat bar, every time we add a variable, different bar, 10 to 15% off of the top of that 1 rep max. Add a box, that's another 10 to 15% off of that 1 rep max. So we just start And that's a way that you can, again, take an educated guess at what the top number is and then cut it 50% from there. So they're not going to do both upper and lower on the same day. They're going to do just their, on day one, they're going to do just their lower, and then they're going to go into accessory work. I personally do you can do full body accessory work. I've done that before. If you're an individual who coaches clients that you either don't see weekly or they prefer a full body split, this is how I would do it. Is I would designate the main movement to be a body part, and then I would give them full body accessory work. In recent history, my clients have really enjoyed going to an upper lower split. I personally think it's harder because it's just a lot of volume in the same areas, but everybody's recovering well. They really like the work done that way. So I have adapted to them, and I've moved away from full body accessory work to just like some of these are, yeah. And so you'll see kind of like different examples of that as we go through. So most, if not all, accessory work is done with that repetition method not to failure, meaning you're going to have 1 to 2 reps in the tank. You need to be able to recover well from the accessory work that you are doing. Reminder that your accessory work is where you're actually getting stronger. Your max efforts are where you're getting tested. The rest of this stuff is supplemental to help you get stronger. Somebody had asked a question about hypertrophy and how you could use the conjugate method for hypertrophy. Yes, absolutely. It's all about the stimulus. So you would have potentially more isolated movements. So like a dumbbell RDL that gets low back, butt, hamstrings. I think that's a great exercise to like develop your butt and your hamstrings, but somebody might want something even more isolated and specific for that. So that's going to come down to exercise choice. But from a stimulus perspective, to develop hypertrophy, you are either going to be in repetition method not to failure or repetition method to failure. And there's something called EQIs, which stands for eccentric quasi isometrics. And that basically means you're failing out of range of motion, which is a popular bodybuilding strategy. It's kind of like a drop set, but like within the tissue that you have versus like lowering your load. So again, everything can be used within the conjugate method because this is a system for problem solving for a person's training goals. It is not a template where you're just going to like plug and chug. Okay. So I chose, because they're doing a squat pattern for their main movement, I'm going to give them a hinge pattern for their accessory work. This is my personal preference. This is how I do things. Someone could easily tell me, I want to do something differently. And I would be like, okay, cool. That makes sense for you and for this person. Like, go for it. And then I also will do a finisher that corresponds with their main movement. So for instance, their main movement, oh, I highlighted these wrong, you guys. I'm sorry, I'll fix that. But anyways, so the safety squat bar against chain, the lower body, this single leg glute bridge is supposed to be yellow, indicating that if you do lower body main movement, then you're going to do lower body finisher. The finisher is typically repetition method to failure, because we are trying to promote a recovery into that tissue. We are trying to give our clients a pump. Blood flow being delivered to that tissue is also bringing nutrients and water, which is going to increase and like hasten the recovery process, which is what we want. That's also great for hypertrophy. I wanted to call attention. So this is a IAF SAP. That's something that I use that just means in as few sets as possible. And then this one, as you can see, it's saying repetition method to failure, but I've actually programmed reps. So what is the case for actually programming numbers of repetition here when I'm talking about the stimulus is so important? Like, I just need to make sure, forget about reps. As long as you get the stimulus, that's what we need. Forget about volume. As long as we get the stimulus, that's what you need. The reason, and this is simply a practical reason, is because different people are at different places with their training education and their training knowledge. So they might not understand what I mean when I talk about stimulus. They might not understand when I say reps to failure or reps to fatigue. Okay. It's my job to teach them. So I might start to manipulate and change my language with them as we get deeper into our client coach relationship. But a lot of times, it's like programming is a language I'm using to talk to my clients about what they need. The other thing is that if you tell somebody to go to failure, you could have 100 people in a room, and I bet only 5, if that, would actually literally go to failure. So I actually typically program more reps than I actually think they can do, because I know that their brain, I mean, and I train some bad people, but like your brain is going to be screaming at you to stop before you've actually received the stimulus. So I just sort of do the thing where it's like, oh, I know this person is going to be late, so I'm going to tell them to get there 15 minutes early. That way they're on time. So if I want you to go to failure, I'm just going to program you something that I know is going to get you to failure, like 100 reps, 200 reps. And if you do it, you're getting the stimulus. And if you bail out, you probably also got the stimulus. It's one of those things. And that's a behavior change. Is it a little bit of like manipulation? Yes, but particularly when you're working with new people, like I have that question all the time. If I program something that says to failure, they're like, well, how many? What does that mean? And I'll say, go until you can't go anymore. And they'll say, well, what is not being able to go anymore? Like to Madeline's point, like, does it mean I can go half range? Does it mean I can do small little reps? Does it mean I take rest? So it involves quite a bit more teaching and coaching. And I think that we are all up for that job, but it's not going to happen in one session. So that's why, even though I'm very much in the like stimulus over everything bucket, from a practical standpoint, like people want to count, they want to do reps that way. This is how I get people to be compliant with programming, because compliancy is more important than them understanding like what's going on in my brain. So that's day 1. Day 2 is the same thing, except now we're doing dynamic effort upper. And as you can see, I've chosen a variation that doesn't have accommodating resistance. So we are starting at 60% of the 1 rep max. And this is an example where I have more full body accessory work. It's not a upper lower split. I kind of ended up like meshing a few programs together. I did want to call out on all of these spreadsheets, anything that is in red is an example of where I've actually used basically straightforward progressive overload linear periodization for accessory work. But I'm going to apply the knowledge that it can't go on longer than 3 or 4 weeks, because then that individual will accommodate to that movement. And some of that is, we're not doing the same weight over and over again. We are going to change things up, but I will give you an example. So for instance, like this is our week 1, day 2 dumbbell floor press, 3x15. If I go down to week 2, day 2, I see that I also have dumbbell floor press. So I'm not changing the variation. I'm simply changing the rep scheme with the intent that that individual is going to lift more, because last week they did 3x15 and this week they're going to go 3x10 to 12. So what you can do for 15 reps, you should be able to do more weight for 10 to 12 reps. And it's really straightforward and they understand it. So there's not just, endless variation. I do hold some things steady. All right. So we get into I want to pause here, maybe see if there's questions. Okay. Week 2, day 1, the weight on the bar increases to 55% of the 1 rep max. The accommodating resistance stays the same. Okay. So AR stays the same. The straight weight increases. We already talked about how I'm making choices on accessories, finishers, repetition method to failure. You can also sprinkle in repetition method to failure into accessories. So for instance, this is a 45-degree back extension, 3 times rep max reps at your body weight. Go until you can't go anymore for 3 sets. 3 sets indicates you're going to take rest in between. Week 2, day 2, same thing. So now we're in the upper body, rather than 60%, we're increasing it to 65% of the 1 rep max. We have already talked about why we would hold an accessory movement the same and just use progressive overload to progress it. This is an example, banded bent over row plus a dumbbell. So you're going to put a dumbbell around a band and do a row. So how do you choose which band you're going to use? How do you choose which tension you're going to use? It's not as specific as it would be for your main movements where we have prescribed percentages that we need to hold true to. So for accessory work, I'm just going to use the band tension or the chain weight that allows for my intended range of motion. So for instance, if in this case with a banded bent over row and there's a dumbbell, so it's a dumbbell row attached to a band. If I want that person to still be able to get to their end range, full range of motion, I'm not going to give them band tension that does not allow for full range of motion. Now, maybe I want to have them fail out of that range of motion and just train middle range stuff. So perhaps I will give them a heavier band. So again, just think it through. Like, what's the point of this? And then decide what tool do I use to get where I'm trying to go. That's the conversation you're having with yourself. And then I forgot to call this out earlier, but I think it's kind of obvious when you see it in a list like this, perhaps. So when we go to, now we're in week 3, day 1, meaning this is the last week of our dynamic effort wave. Okay. For both upper and lower. So now we are at 60% for our safety squat bar with chains plus 20% chain weight. The straight weight continues to go up. The accommodating resistance stays the same. Everything else stays the same. The kneeling Anderson overhead press, it has now gone from 60 to 65 to 70. So it's increased at the same increments, the same percentage increments, but we're ending at 70%. So why does this start at 50 and then we're adding 20%? And then why does this end with 70? The reason for that is 70%, and this has to do with something called Prilipin's chart, which you guys know about. That's the whole like reps in reserve. If you can squat 3 reps at a certain number, it means your max is this, right? That's a strategy that has been used by coaches before. But what we also know from that chart is that pretty much anything below 70%, and this is not a hard and fast rule, particularly for new lifters, because they're going to just get trained from like almost any stimulus you give them. But for people who are trained, anything below 70% is not a strong enough training stimulus to change biology for hypertrophy, connective tissue, anything like that. Okay. So everything needs to be, we need to be kind of working towards that 60 to 70% effort. 50 is much too low. But so when we have 50% on the bar and 20% in accommodating resistance, that's giving us 70% and above. When we start with 60% here, we're in that 60 to 70% training stimulus range. Okay. And we know that the bar speed is still going to be moving quickly enough in order for us to train the dynamic effort method. One of the methods that I stuck in for the endurance training, that is actually something called strength speed, which means you are moving heavier weight at a slower bar path, and it lives between dynamic effort and max effort. So you will do like doubles or triples at 75, 80, 85%. Okay. So that's just an example. So what I like to do with, this last week of my accessory wave, because remember we did dumbbell RDLs, 3x15, then 3x10 to 12. My last week, I'm choosing, I want my clients to get an 8 rep max, and I want them to get it in as few sets as possible. If I was talking to somebody who was familiar with kind of the paradigm of like just getting to failure quickly, and it's still training to failure, with 8 reps. It's like, I want you to literally just be able to do 8. And the more you work with someone, the safer it is to push them in this direction. I have over here repetition method not to failure, but this could also be repetition method to failure, with the goal of failure being like 6 to 8 or something like that. We don't want to spend a lot of volume here. Like, we don't want to spend volume currency doing this. So if someone had some data on themselves and they knew that they could do 10 RDLs with, like, I don't know, 30 pounds in each hand, because that's what they did last week, then maybe they could make an educated guess that their 8 rep max is going to be like somewhere between 35 and 45. I would want them to find that as quickly as possible. I would actually prefer in this scenario for someone to like aggressively choose a weight and only be able to do 1 set than to take 4 to 5 sets finding this number. Okay. I'd rather them fail faster than not. And then the stuff we already talked about, every single week, the finishers change. Every single week, the accessories change. The main movements are just holding true. And then after we get through the 3rd week of our dynamic effort wave, they get a max effort day. And they're going to do the same exact variation, safety squat bar against chain, no box. It's still 20% chain. I'll actually add that right now. It's always the same accommodating resistance, but I'm not assigning them a percentage, because we're going to be just going as heavy as we can until we get to our heavy single. I included this video that I created, which is how to find your 1 rep max, on my YouTube page in this spreadsheet right here. It's also somewhere in the presentation, probably under max effort method, if that would make the most sense. Why do I put max effort of the same variation at the end of the wave? It's because these individuals are now very practiced and as proficient as they're probably going to be at these movements, because in the past month, if they've come to every session and they're doing their job, they've got 75-ish reps of this movement under their belt, which means they've had a lot of practice, which means that increases our chances of them being able to maintain their position under load, because they understand their movement strategy so well. So I've made the decision to put the max effort at the end of the month, because I think it gives us the best chance of getting to a true max. Now, why aren't we maxing out every week with Gen Pop clients? Max effort method stimulus only needs to be touched for people who are not specifically trying to increase their absolute strength every 30 to 45 days. So if we touch it once a month, they are minimum maintaining their strength. But if they are doing their accessory work hard and they are doing their dynamic effort work at the correct speed and the correct intensity, then they are going to get stronger. Those things need to be touched with much, much higher frequency than max effort does. So we would do upper body only, and then I trim their accessory work a little bit, just because honestly, it can take some time to get up to a max effort lift. For a trained individual, it's going to take them 7 to 9 jumps to get to max effort. That's what I want it to be, no matter what the movement is. If they are an untrained individual, for a movement, this is a tall kneeling Anderson overhead press. Like, this is hard to move heavy weight at. This is like what I would call a self-limiting movement. 5 to 7 jumps, maybe. We don't want to make too big of jumps. That has to do with kind of like how the central nervous system understands the load. We want things to feel very reasonable going up. But yeah, there's no expectation for like a brand new person to be able to, do 7 to 9 attempts for a bench press or an overhead press when their max is literally like 45 pounds. Like, it just doesn't make sense. So they can still max out. I might have them take their heavy single 2 or 3 times, but they just need like a smaller amount of jumps. So that's what I've put into here. You guys know your clients. If they can tolerate 7 to 9 jumps, give it to them. Okay. It's important to note, though, that from an overall volume standpoint, and I did put this in the spreadsheet as well under the max effort method, we are barely spending any of our volume currency, just like in max effort. So much more of it, as you can see from this entire month's snapshot, is in other methodology, other stuff. A lot of accessory work, a lot of supportive strength work, a lot of unilateral work. That's where you add in your rotational stuff. That's where you add in your sport specific stuff. That's where you add in literally anything else you want to add in. Okay. And then the tall kneeling overhead press, same thing. That would be on the second day. And then you have your corresponding finishers that are going to help you flush things out. I typically tell people that on a max effort day, you're going to feel tired and hungry. You won't feel as sore. There's just not as much muscle shear. So there's not as much like DOMs. There's just like not as much opportunity for it. So this is, and I know we're cooking here with time, but this is like practically somebody could take this and apply it immediately to something that they want to do. And again, like these are just the means, which is the exercise column. This can be whatever, you want it to be for your people. Another example, I'll go over to the endurance athlete really quick. So for instance, I just made this up. Staggered safety squat bar, good morning off of pins, safety squat bar, low box step up. They need to develop some maximal strength outputs in a single leg or like a staggered variation where they're really driving energy and stimulus into one leg at a time. However, they cannot do that until they have good bilateral strength. Okay. So I get it that with running, and there's all these running programs out here and everything's single leg this and blah, 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 that. But then when I evaluate the person, they're unable to do a body weight squat. And I'm not being like, I'm dead serious. Like people who run marathons and I evaluate them, like it's amazing. They can literally only run a marathon. They're so specific that that's all their body can do. They cannot move in any other way. And that is not good for performance. That's why they're coming to see me, because what's happening is that they've plugged themselves in to this pattern of running and they want to become better. They want to improve their gait cycle, but they don't have the strength resources, the biological resources, the tissue and the joint health to sustain and support what they're trying to express through their gait cycle. Okay. So, I kind of explained a couple of different things here, like why would an endurance athlete even need maximal strength? For one reason, this is an example that I give for everybody, is if you are going to the grocery store and you have 10 bags, do you want to take 2 trips or do you want to take 1 trip? We all want to take 1 trip. So if carrying 5 bags in each hand is 90% effort for me, it's 90% of the amount of bags that I'm capable of carrying. That's like really hard to do with just groceries. And that's one thing that I have to do during my day. That doesn't count me walking my dog. That doesn't count me cleaning my kitchen floors. That doesn't even count me doing my formal exercise class. So how could I make carrying those 10 bags 50% effort versus 90% effort? Well, the way that I do that is I raise my ceiling. And how do I raise my ceiling? I raise my absolute strength, and then everything under that is a percentage of my absolute strength. So that is why an endurance athlete, because they need to be able to perform incredibly like tons and tons and tons of reps at like 50 to 60%. But if they're 50 to 60%, which typically running is 3 to 4 times an individual's body weight, and you take about 1,000 steps per mile on each leg, you're really accumulating volume in a crazy, crazy way more volume than we're getting in the weight room. Okay. If that 50%, or what we want the 50% to be, their body weight and all that, if that's super close to what they are, like to their absolute strength threshold, they're not gonna be able to do like 10 miles. It's just not going to happen. So we need to be able to raise up that absolute strength threshold so that whatever we're doing below, those percentages make sense. So yeah, this is, I think whoever asked for this, maybe take a look at this. I inserted like a point A because I didn't really know, what the specific circumstances are, but this is a good way for you to think of things. So point A is like, who is this person? They want to strength train to improve their health and well-being as an endurance athlete. I didn't know if there was performance considerations, but they're asking for this. So I'm just going to say that they're an experienced runner. They already do kind of like, if you're doing your endurance training correctly or your conditioning training correctly, you're actually already using the conjugate method because you're combining different energy systems training. You're doing VO2 max training, you're doing base, aerobic base training, you're doing interval training. That's the conjugate method. You don't just go out and, run 5 miles every single day at the same pace and then show up to run the 100-meter dash. That doesn't make sense. We wouldn't do that. And we're not going to do that in the gym either. So maybe someone has lifted weights before, but not run a conjugate program. I just made up this avatar for this program. So I already talked about that. They need to be able to tolerate repeated loading at 3 to 4 times their body weight forces through a single leg. What is their sport? Producing moderate force consistently in a short period of time. That's talking about the gait, meaning like an individual that's running and wants to be able to run, not a sprinter. This is more endurance. They need to be able to produce moderate force through their feet in a short period of time to propel them forward. That is an efficient way to run. Typically, I used to actually only work with runners. They're going to need hip extension. They need posterior chain development. They need thoracic rotation, hip rotation, and then they need tons of toe and ankle stuff. This was just me generally knowing, like, this is not a specific assessment, but this is just generally what do these types of individuals need. And then very importantly, they must be able to execute their physical task when tired. Like that's what endurance is. Endurance is maintaining position and doing the thing when you are very, very tired. So we're also kind of back to, you have to be strong enough to maintain your position, which goes all the way back to Madeline's initial question, which is like, what do we do when we see form breakdown? Well, it's information for us, number one. And number two, at some point, every single person's form is going to break down. And from like a risk standpoint, I don't see why it would be more dangerous for someone's form to break down a little bit under a heavy squat or deadlift or bench press or clean and snatch, or their form breaking down at mile 6 out of 20 miles. But for some reason, the latter is much more accepted than the former because it's body weight. But it's actually way more volume. It's way more volume. Like I get, if you so for instance, like Madeline, you could calculate your actual volume on a dynamic day and it would absolutely crush your volume on a max effort day. But people frequently think, oh, I'm lifting the most I can lift, but it's only like 7 to 9 lifts versus the 20 to 30 reps that you're doing, not even including your warm-up sets. Okay. So this is, I gave an example in here of waving a finisher. I gave them some calf raises in a few different positions. I gave them rep ranges or to failure, whatever comes first, right? So I'm trying to teach them that we're going to do things to failure. For endurance, this is perfect because they are going to 1,000% have to go to failure in their sport. So what did I do to waive it? I added a weight vest. And then what did I do to waive it again? I kept the weight vest, but then I added a band around the hip to promote hip extension while they're doing their calf raises, which is actually hopefully going to give us triple extension. So that's an example of how to waive that. Again, anything in red on any of these spreadsheets is just things that are given progressive overload. But this calf raise example was kind of one where it wasn't just adding weight week after week. It was also manipulating the position. You guys know how training variables can increase intensity, tempo, speed, like those kinds of things. Use those things to create a wave. It doesn't just have to be load. This right here, going to like an AMRAP, as well as this right here, those are examples of strength endurance method, meaning you're tired and now you got to produce a lot of good reps. Important for lifters as well. Let's let's see here. Yeah, so I included some like non-traditional upper body max efforts. Again, you guys can look at this. What else did I want to call attention to here? Oh, okay. I liked this. Whoever wants to try this, get back to me because I haven't done this. I came up with it last night. I like it a lot. Okay, so what are we going to do here for the secondary movement on your speed lower day? So this is true strength endurance method. You only need one set if you're doing it correctly. You're going to take your conventional deadlift, 50% of your conventional deadlift. So say it's 300. So you're going to put 150 pounds on the bar and you're going to do maximum reps. And we'll just say that's repetition method to failure, but it's also that strength endurance method because you're going to go as quickly as possible. And we'll just say as soon as form breaks in literally any way, we're going to call it. So as soon as you like can't keep the bar close to you, as soon as you have to take a break at the top to catch your breath, it's over. So week 2, what are you going to do? You're going to do conventional deadlift at 50% of your 1 rep max. You've recorded how many reps you did before. So say you did like 75 reps. Now you're going to do 75 reps, but you have to go faster. So you have to basically produce the same amount of force in a shorter period of time. Okay. Then the 3rd week, you're going to do that same exact thing, but you're going to add band tension. And I would say because we're at 50%, we're going to use the same thing that we would use for dynamic effort. We're going to go 20% band tension, and you need to beat your time a 3rd time. So now you're pulling your straight weight, you've got band tension, and you still have to produce 75 reps, and you need to basically make this the fastest week of all. And technically, because the bands are happening, you're going to have a very fast eccentric. So it should make you faster. It's just going to feel terrible. Like it'll feel empowering, but it'll be hard physically. We'll say that. So if anybody wants to do that and get back to me, I would love to hear how that goes. This was just a thought experiment. I have not done this in practically at all. And then because the 3 weeks are over, we switch to a new movement because the wave is done and we don't want there to be accommodation. This is an example of something I would use with endurance athletes, marching, sled pulls, that kind of thing. And again, you're just going to somehow increase the stimulus week over week. And then I put this in purple. This is just a straight up example of periodization. Like I use periodization with my lifters. There's lots of reasons to do it, particularly if they are very well acquainted with the other stimulus. And also this is actually I pulled some of this from Madeline's. We are practicing a new position. And so I don't want to add a lot of different variables because I want them to understand the new position that we're doing. But it's basically just increasing week over week over week. But then I insert, so this is the 3rd week. It goes from 76% to 78%. What I would do, depending on the athlete, is the most I would give them likely is 4 to 5 weeks. And then I would give them some kind of deload. Meaning I would just give them like a regular dynamic effort day. I would program like a self-limiting movement just so that they're getting an underload. Nobody in the conjugate system that I work with, but we do deloads, but we do not stop training. Period. All right. So we're right at 7. I want to take questions. I want to be able, Rebecca, your question was at the team split. Farrah, you asked about the boxer, but who needs to like be done for the day? Who has questions? Who wants to stay for 30 more minutes?
I just want to take a quick second to point out, I think the Gen Pop
Mhm.
sheet was like a kind of a single and you scroll down.
Yes.
And then
Yeah.
the endurance one, it's each
Yep.
week is in one
Thank you.
column and you
Yep.
scroll to the right to
Yep. Thank you.
progress.
Yeah. This one has like kind of my brain on the page. The rest of these are not as nuanced. They're just basically examples of programming with some notes. But I didn't pull out all the methods and the means, and I didn't do all of that for you guys on this one. You can start to get in it. I would say that would be a really good exercise, is to try to go through these things and identify like, where does everything belong? work it backwards, try to reverse engineer, like, why did she make this choice? Yeah. All right. I'm going to go
I
to,
think for
yeah,
that conventional deadlift thing, I would just have to, I would not, I couldn't see that the next week was the same number of reps, or else I think that my mind would call it sooner,
you
you
know
know.
what though? That's actually perfect for you then. It's like exposure therapy.
Yeah.
I used to do this thing in college where I was a 400-meter dash runner and a 400-meter hurdler. And rather than running 400 repeats, we would have to run minute repeats and we would have to go past the line.
Ugh.
Horrible. That's kind of what this is. Have
Yeah.
to go beyond what you think you're capable of. Like that's part of training. Okay. I might make you do that. All right.
Oh, great.
Okay, so team splits. Rebecca, this was your question. I actually just copy and pasted what you emailed me up into this left-hand corner. I did not program anything. I conceptually gave you what should be going on. And I'm happy to like answer more specific programming questions. So you gave me a scenario where a football team or a team, they have Saturday game day and then they lift. So what I chose is that they're going to do their dynamic effort lower on game day because I like to keep the hard training days together because otherwise we will not have time to recover. We're just going to be always, it's like, don't do, if you try to do like a hard thing on day one and then an easy thing paired with it, that means that there's another hard training session that lives out here, but we're running out of recovery days because I think we know collectively as coaches and certainly at the college level, certainly we're definitely working with high school athletes, like everybody is under recovered. So we have to prioritize recovery in this, in this kind of picture. The main thing that you have to keep in mind is how quickly things recover. So they're going to do their game, they're going to do dynamic effort, lower, keep the hard workouts together. Does their volume change in season? Yeah. So that would be like where you would peel back accessory work. There's a million different ways you can address that. Sundays, they would be off. So neurologically, we will recover in 48 to 72 hours. However, our biology, our muscles are going to be recovered in about 24 hours. So I would say that, you know, they could do things on Sunday. I put like skill work. However, because that neurology isn't recovered yet, they shouldn't be learning anything new. They shouldn't be doing something with a really high cognitive or emotional load if it can be helped, because they're just not ready for it. But any maintenance work can be done here. But they shouldn't be they also shouldn't be getting any inputs for musculoskeletal stuff because they're not recovered. Mondays, it sounded like that you said that they're off. So I just kind of like left that blank. If possible, what would be cool is if they could have like some of this go into Mondays as well. They probably won't be ready for like new skill work. Like I said, they won't be ready for new development yet, but they will be ready to go for like a training session that involves conditioning, training stimulus cars, training stimulus pails, rails. And if I'm speaking a different language right now, this is some of the stuff that I had said that involves internal strength. I'm answering Rebecca's question specifically. So Tuesdays when they lift again, this is an example, option one of a 12-day lifting split. So they're going to go first Tuesday, max effort upper, second Tuesday, max effort lower, third Tuesday, max effort upper. Now, in season, I say maintain minimums for those who have it, increase max for those who need it. We already kind of talked about the example with football players where a D lineman needs to be able to bench. This is for like the NFL. So it's got to be lower for college and way lower for high school, obviously. So there's some kind of minimum, and we'll just use 500 pounds because that's what it is for like D1 college and NFL. For a D lineman, they need to be able to bench press 500 pounds. So if they're a defensive player and they're going to do their max effort upper, they need to do a variation that is comparable to a 500-pound bench press. It could be 300 pounds with 200 pounds in chains. It could be something to bands plus straight weight. It could be half range of motion. It just needs to be around a 500-pound stimulus. Okay. They need to touch it and be done. They need to get there in as few sets as possible and move on. All they are doing is maintaining their minimums. And we already talked about that they actually don't need to touch max effort as frequently. We don't. It's every 30 to 45 days. So for athletes that already have that minimum, that 500-pound bench press, then I would say we're only going to give them internal strength and accessory work. They don't need to be hitting their max effort every single Tuesday. But if they need it, if they're needing to increase their absolute strength, then yeah, they're going to work every single week to improve their bench press until they get into that 500-pound place, and then they're going to go into a different bucket. So I understand that logistically this might not be possible because it's a huge team, but this is how I'm going to my best effort to answer the question. Wednesdays, nothing. They're doing practice, blah, blah, blah. Dynamic effort upper. We already talked about what that could be. Then we're back to Fridays off, back to game day, which would also have the dynamic effort lower. So week 2, sorry, this kind of like bled into this. So this is like it's not a 10-day split. It's actually a 12-day split where they're getting 4 workouts in, but they're alternating their max efforts. And I just said like this alternate color is like this, it's 1.5 weeks is basically what we're looking at. The opposite or the other option would be that you could do max effort upper and lower on the same day. If everybody has hit their minimums, this is cool because what could happen is they could get, they need a 600-pound squat. I don't know, let's use trap bar deadlift because I think that's way more common. So I don't know, say they need like a 550-pound trap bar deadlift and they need, whatever, it's a college team, they need like a 350-pound bench press. Say everybody's got those. Again, they just need to touch that level of weight. They need to touch those weights one time, get in and get out. So rather than the 9 to 7 jumps that we would do when we're doing max effort on 2 separate days, I would say 5 to 7 jumps each, or something like 7 to 9 jumps combined, meaning they're going to take like 4 jumps for max effort lower and 3 jumps for max effort upper or something like that. And that's 7 total jumps to get to max effort. And then again, like where you're getting stronger, where you're getting better is going to be all of that like auxiliary work that's going to get programmed for accessory work, and then their internal strength stuff, which is going to be for their connective tissue, for the reactive strength, for all of that stuff. So this is conceptually what my recommendation would be without going into specific means of exercises, because honestly, I'm not the right person to program like specifically for a college football team. Do I think this is a good way to set it up? Yes, I do. Is that helpful? What other questions around that?
Yeah, it's very helpful. Like I'm just very, uh, recovery, of course, with my job, for those of you who don't know me, I'm a head athletic trainer at a college. So, recovery is one of the biggest things, on my mind. And I have just been curious about this for a long time, that the team always lifts on Sundays. And I'm just like, they feel like they've been run over by a truck. So how effective is that lift really going to be? Whereas I would love to do something just like an internal training session with the team on that day. Now, way back in the day when I was at a different college, like where I actually went to school, they lifted on game day. So, like now that you're saying this, I'm like, wow, like, and I had huge respect for those strength coaches way back in the day. Like, I feel like they really did things right, so to speak. So obviously, and I think I'm just looking for confirmation here, we would do the dynamic effort lower like in the morning on game day, and then eat, hydrate, get ready to roll. You know, I just, we could probably
Yeah.
talk for a really long
Yeah, I
time
mean, it seems
conceptually about it.
counterintuitive, but like they're not like it seems counterintuitive, but they are going to be primed for explosive
Yeah,
power.
yeah.
If you've never, this is an interesting experiment. If you've never used accommodating resistance, I would encourage you to do it for bench press, because this is the quickest way to understand what I'm talking about. Is get a straight bar, get two micro bands orange if you're somebody who benches under 200 pounds. If you're somebody who benches over 200 pounds, get two mini bands that are red. 90% of the time, those are the colors that correspond with those resistances. And do like a set of 9x3, where you're just going to do 3 quick reps, take a 30-second break, 3 quick reps, and follow the dynamic effort percentages with 50% on the bar and then the band tension. Take everything off except for the straight weight, and then go bench 50%. You are going to feel like you are throwing a car. So an actual strategy for people to bench the most they've ever benched is to bench against bands first and then go execute their maximum effort. I've seen people do it in the warm-up room. Speaking of like the old school way, there's this guy named George Halpert. He passed away sometime in the last, I want to say like 2 years. He was a bench specialist at Westside Barbell. He also was one of my mentor, John Quince. He was a training partner with him. He helped my coach, Laura Phelps Stackhouse, become the first woman to bench over 5. And the way that he manipulated and used accommodating resistance is amazing. But to the point of this is that like, this will make them better at the game. They won't be tired yet. Not enough time has passed for any of that stuff to happen. So giving them explosive power work in the morning is going to make them absolutely animals in the afternoon. That's my opinion.
Yeah, I think it's just knowing our strength coach, it would be a very
Yeah.
hard sell. But well, maybe not. Yeah, maybe this is more of a conversation with the head coach, and we'll see.
Sure. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, and I don't think this is specific to football either. Like any power sport could benefit from this.
Yeah, I was just thinking our wrestling team, our wrestling coach is very, very like soaking up everything that I've been telling him.
I honestly think a wrestling coach would be more because they don't care about things being hard.
Mm-mm.
Nope.
They love it.
Yeah.
Make the
Yeah.
room 100 degrees.
Yeah. Yeah. And also, this is really easy to strip away for taper, which I find other models much more harder to manipulate because there's nowhere to gain recovery from.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I don't have a lot of experience. I have no experience at the college level, but just even working with high school athletes who are coming to me and how they have their training set up, I'm just like, I don't know how to take anything else away from you because all your stuff is so spread out.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I want you to take a total day off, and they can't.
Mm-hmm.
They can't even take 2 days off, and they're just, it's like the more is more model.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Yeah, we can talk about this more, but you have access to this.
Yeah.
All right. Any other questions? We're going to go over the boxer, but anybody else want to chime in here? No questions in the chat. Okay. I did the thing with the boxer that I did. So I've never trained a boxer. So this is like really, really high level because I kind of wanted to show how we could like basically like walk through something together. So I did a little bit of digging, and what I found is that most coaches, first of all, conjugate method is extremely popular for coaching martial arts, boxing, all the MMA stuff. Like it's probably just as popular in that realm as a jujitsu. Tons of jujitsu people train this way. But what I found is that they do something slightly different than, it's not a different model. It's just that they choose to plug in their conditioning on their dynamic effort lower day, which honestly makes so much sense because of what I just said to Rebecca. They are in the business of producing powerful, like several reps of powerful effort, and then kind of like, I don't want to say not doing anything, but there's bouts of extremely high power output, and then there's bouts of like low power output, which would be something comparable to a football play, for instance. So they pair up their conditioning with their dynamic effort lower work because they know that their power output and their conditioning is going to improve when they precede it with their dynamic effort lower. Another anecdotal example of this is you could do speed squats and then test your power output on an assault bike. That's another way that you can just like understand practically what I'm talking about here is test your power output on an assault bike and say 10 seconds. Do that on day 1. A week later, do some dynamic effort lower, immediately get on the bike, test your 10-second output, very likely will be higher. Okay, so max effort lower, so all the general strength paradigms stay true. So it's like, yeah, this individual needs to be able to move in a bunch of different ways, but my job and our job, I mean, I'm sure there's some people in this room that, you know, they have their skill coaches as well. And so their strength stuff overlaps with their skill stuff. But for me, I don't really do that except for in the powerlifting world, but powerlifting and strength training are so ingrained that it's like those all overlap very seamlessly. So when you're working with a boxer, when we're talking about our point A, it's like, okay, they need to be able to, they need a little bit of endurance strength because it could go for 10, 12 rounds. However, they also need to be incredibly strong and explosive because they need to be able to punch and kick. So they can't strictly just be endurance and outlast their opponent. When they do, you know, go on the attack to take points and take down, they need to be very quick. So as a baseline, everybody that's doing this just needs to be strong. So for their max effort lower, and you can just, again, you look at the athlete and say, okay, where are their areas of opportunity? So this one was, I pulled out, I just said, okay, safety squat bar, front box squat, 1 rep max. A lot of the examples that I've been using use a safety squat bar. Pretty much everybody I work with also uses a straight bar. I will say though, that a straight bar is not as accessible. It's kind of, again, I don't know why this happens, but the specialty equipment gets sort of, you know, designated to athletic individuals at specialty gyms, at barbell gyms, and only those people can use it and everybody else needs to use the straight bar. But a straight bar is not particularly easy to work with. You have to have quite a bit of, there's a ton of prerequisites that you need for your spine. There's a ton of prerequisites that you need for your shoulders. Even deadlifting with a straight bar is much more challenging than deadlifting with a trap bar. So I'm working with a bunch of different people. We want to be able to use a straight bar because I want everybody to be able to get into a lot of different positions. But having access to different barbells, if you're someone who has a gym or works in a gym or goes to a gym and all you have access to is straight bar, like if I had to choose one thing to kind of say, hey, this would be my recommendation, would be to get a safety squat bar. It's super versatile and you can do it one-handed. You can do it no-handed. It's super accessible. You don't need arms to utilize it. That's done. So single heavy rep, 1 rep max safety squat bar, front box squat. A Dimmel deadlift, that is a style of deadlift that requires explosive hip extension. So with a boxer or a fighter, not really as much with a boxer, but with a fighter, hip extension, like having good hip extension and explosive hips, like for a wrestler or someone doing MMA, it's almost like having another leg because they're going to use that way to leverage and to score points on somebody. And then they've got Bulgarian split squats, which can be done any number of ways, banded good mornings, hanging straight leg raises. Okay. So this is just something that I like. There's a bunch of books. One of the books is the Book of Methods, which is written by Louis Simmons. And there was an example of boxing, and this was kind of one of them. Floor press, weighted pull-ups, working up to a 3 rep max. So this is where it got a little bit more specific. So banded punching at reps to failure. So punching against accommodating resistance against bands. What we need to be careful with here, though, is that the band tension, just like dynamic effort method. So this is kind of like dynamic effort method inserted on a max effort day, is we never want the punching to slow down significantly. Okay. So we don't want it to be such heavy band tension that the punches are like moving through water, because that speed is what is getting trained. And you don't want slow punching, you want fast punching. So I would say that when you're assigning accommodating resistance to movements, just know that it's not only the load that's getting trained, but it is also the speed. So if you are looking for some kind of specific speed parameter for your athlete to get carryover into, give them appropriate band tension that will allow them to move quickly. Chest supported rows, half kneeling landmine press, Russian twist. A boxer is going to have to be able, is going to have exceptional thoracic rotation. They're going to have probably exceptional spinal rotation, but they are also going to be potentially like muscle bound depending on, you know, their weight class. Even somebody that's like a middle weight class is probably going to have quite a bit of muscle. They want to be able to move quickly, but muscle also is going to protect them. So having that additional muscle on their midsection is going to act kind of like body armor. So we would want to be implementing internal training exercises that are going to preserve their spine, the integrity of their spine, particularly the rotational capacities of the spine. And then they're gonna need to do heavy spine rotation stuff, because they are doing, this example goes back to the runner who is landing on a single leg for 20 miles. This boxer is, you know, hitting, and I don't know the stats on this because I'm not into boxing, but they are, you know, swinging and connecting a certain average amount per arm, probably, you know, 2/3 towards their, 2/3 towards like their dominant arm, and then maybe like, you know, 1/3 towards their non-dominant arm. But again, like they need to be able to do their best to maintain position and continue to distribute strength through their arm in that way. The other thing that we did not talk about at all is box jumps. I'm going to go to the powerlifting page very quickly. There's something in here. Where did I put that? Oh, I put it here. So this is in the endurance athlete programming, that box jumps have a bunch of different protocols within the conjugate method. But if you want to jump, it goes before and or during dynamic effort lower. Okay, and that's what we have here. So then they're going to do trap bar deadlifts against bands, utilizing rest periods during dynamic effort. So traditionally, we would say the most rest that a person should be taking in between dynamic effort sets is a minute, but I frequently will program every 30 seconds on the 30 seconds, or even shorter than that. I've programmed every 15 seconds just to be clear. Lifting weights quickly might get your heart rate up, but I would not consider it conditioning because it isn't specific enough. The only way that you could potentially drive some specificity is by making your rest periods congruent with what your sport is doing. So for instance, like with, say you were going to do maybe on dynamic effort day, the example is a straight bar bench press, but maybe you were going to do dumbbell bench press against band, like a single arm, because that's kind of like what punching is. And you figured out that the average rest in between punches, I don't know, is something like 6 or 10 seconds. I don't know. I'm making stuff up because I know nothing about boxing, but you could then program rest that makes sense against what an individual would need between sets for dynamic effort. It wouldn't go in the max effort because you need longer rest for max effort, because those are two separate energy systems. You need total, or at least as much glycogen restoration as you can have with max effort lifts. You don't need that with dynamic effort lifts because you simply are not exerting as much force as you can there. So if you wanted to include, so exercises and means doesn't just have to be lifting weights. It can be doing sled drags. It can be doing rope slams. It can be doing other things. So I kind of just, this example that I put in here, you know, I didn't even put all the weeks in, because it could literally just, if someone did a front squat here, I would say they're going to do a deadlift here. And then I didn't really talk about how to wave max effort lifts, but I would say go to a good morning next, or some other self-limiting exercise. Self-limiting exercise just means that it's going to be a position that is inherently crappy, so that an individual, basically all individuals, are not going to be able to move as much weight as they typically would there. And so it gives us that deload without taking us out of the training stimulus. So this was kind of like a quick and dirty one. And again, like, I'm happy to talk offline. I'm happy to like extrapolate more from that. But I felt like this was a good example of like, these people just need to be strong. There are some sport specific and considerations, but it's more just about building general strength, doing tissue specific work, which is again, that's like everything that's in italics. That's a totally different question. And then just making choices based on what stimulus they're going to need within their sport. So I think since we are like right at 7:28, I'm going to call it there. Questions, but everybody's going to have access to this. What's it called? The PowerPoint presentation. Everyone already has access to this, to the programming examples. I haven't forgot about that, the isometrics. I just need to get those videos out to you guys, and then, you know, I'm available. So if questions arise, I'm happy to do that now or later.
No, Sarah, that was excellent. I think if I
Okay.
want a month of programming, I'll pay you for it. But this was a great week looking at how all those different exercises translate really directly to a lot of those different skills. So I really appreciate that. This was really useful for me. Thank you.
Okay, good. I'm glad. Yeah, I honestly think like someone who's more like, I understand the stimulus side of things, but someone who's more familiar with the sport could be way more creative with the means and the exercise selection. So like, even if you just want to use this as like a thought experiment, I really encourage people to just try to start programming some stuff and just like go for it. You know, like, you definitely know more than your clients. You have their best interests at heart. You're going to keep them safe. So making a mistake is fine. They're not going to know, and it's not probably even going to really be a mistake. All right, cool. Madeline, are you in here?
Yes.
Okay, cool. Are we good to wrap up?
Yeah. Yeah, I think so. There's yeah, there's no questions in the chat.
Okay.
Yeah, thank you so much, Sarah. What a wonderful
Welcome.
just session over 3 weeks. And thank you so much for all the extra like deliverables you've given us.
My pleasure.
Yeah, I think just folks can always reach out via email that you've sent out. And I know that our contact information is also on the slides that you've shared. Um, so yeah, I think just, yeah, there you go. Check out that coupon, which is an incredible opportunity. Yeah.
Yeah, pay. I was gonna say, like, yeah, supporting Strength for All Bodies. And that if there's coaches who are like, oh, I don't really want programming, I want like mentorship, or I want more information on this, like, we can talk about that. Cause I understand like some people, you know, they've already got their lists and their stuff squared away, or they might already be working with a coach and that just doesn't make sense. But yeah, I'm happy to continue this conversation offline, and I really appreciate the opportunity, and I hope that everybody is able to support Strength for All Bodies in some way. It's a really awesome organization and incredibly powerful and relevant message.
Thank you so much, Sarah.
Of course. All right, I appreciate you guys. Everybody have a great week.